Hello friends, we are here today in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and this chapter is a doozy. It's long and it's got a lot of things in it that are controversial. So rather than glazing over the things, I think I'll just highlight the controversial stuff. So he starts off, and first I should say he's answering a question. You know, most of this book is just answers to questions. And it's kind of hard because it's like, you know, it's like hearing a phone call, but you're only hearing one side. So you kind of have to deduce on your own, like, what is the question that they're asking? And so he's talking about basically like sex and marriage. And so he says, you know, it's good to abstain from sex. He's not even saying sexual immorality. He's saying it's good to abstain from sex, period. And he's like, but your desires are there. We're all real people, and it's not so easy. So you should marry. You know, if it's better to marry than to burn with desire. Now, the major controversy that comes up here is, you know, it says, you know, a husband and wife, that they should not deprive each other. Now, it should be said here, and it's very clear from the passage, that he's not saying anything about the women that he's not saying to the men as well. He's saying, you know, men have the rights over their women, but women have rights over their men. You know, that when you come together, you know, you have conjugal rights for each other. So this is, you know, it goes both ways. But it says you shouldn't deprive each other. I would say that most people in the United States would probably look at this and say, well, it's still kind of unfair because men tend to want sex more than women. But that's not always true. Now, I think that what you really need to think of when it comes to this part here is to figure out what exactly is the question that is answering. And it's pretty clear when you read the text that the question is, you know, when you become a Christian, and they were in this over sexualized culture, when you become a Christian in this culture, does that mean that you should completely abstain from sex? And, you know, Paul is saying no. Now, this isn't a crazy question, because there's some, you know, I mentioned a couple weeks back, you know, there's the Quakers and the Shakers, and they really did believe this. And even if you read St. Augustine, he was saying, you know, sex is something that you should stay away from. Even though this chapter is here, there's still people that kind of glaze over it, and they're like, no, sex is bad, we should just stay away from it. And what he's saying is, you shouldn't do that. He's saying if you're married, you guys should not abstain from each other. You know, you guys should come back to each other unless you both decide that you should. And so when he's saying you have the rights over your husband and your husband over your wife, you know, if you're just saying, look, I'm a Christian now, and I have decided that because of my Christianity, I'm not going to associate with the over-sexualization of our culture, and I'm just going to abstain from sex from here on out. You need to remain my spouse, but it's not going to be a physical relationship anymore. He's saying, no, can't do that. Now, the question is, what about in the moment? You know, there's times where one person is into it and one person's not. And, you know, I don't know if there's an easy way to navigate this, but I would say that that a good principle would be that you know, you should have a lot of compassion for the other person. You know, if you're married and you are the person, I won't give a gender, even though I tend to do it because it tends to go a certain way. But if you are a person and your spouse wants sex and you don't, you should have some compassion for the person who does, because that feeling doesn't just go away. And that's what Paul is saying, you know, lest the person fall into temptation, you know, fall into sexual sin because they're not getting these needs met. And he's saying, you know, on the other side, now this is kind of my interpretation, that, you know, the Bible's not exactly addressing this, but if you're the person who wants to and the other person doesn't, I would have a lot of compassion for that person too. You know, that person, you don't know what they're going through, you don't know how they're feeling, and so you know, you should have some compassion for each other when it comes to this issue. But the Bible is really coming down on the side that it's good to do it. You know, if you're married, you should probably lean in that direction, because that's what the Bible is saying here. You know, it's good for couples to have that intimacy with each other. So he goes on and he talks a lot about divorce here. And you know, he says this is the other most controversial statement here. He's saying if you divorce, you know, it's good. You know, he says if a woman divorces, she should not remarry. Now, I should say here that he is also saying that it's good to not be married, period. You know, but what he's saying is that marriage is a very serious thing. You know, when you say for rich or for poor, for better or worse, you know, in sickness and health, for as long as you both shall live, you know, and you're making that vow before God, that's a very serious thing. It's not something that should be taken lightly, that, you know, you should just divorce for any reason. He's saying, you know, this is a vow. This is a vow before God, and you should try to do everything in your power to keep that vow. Now, this goes for men and for women, and what he's saying here is that this is an Old Testament principle. You know, he says, I don't say this, the Lord says this. And, you know, this is something that's straight from Moses. So that's what he's saying. Now, there's many people today that don't follow this, and you know, there's forgiveness for all kinds of things, you know, but if you want to know what the Bible says, it's saying that you know, marriage is a serious thing, and you should do everything you should do to keep it. So, you know, I feel like when these things come up, you know, when people want to get a divorce, they start reading the fine print. You know, they start trying to figure out what the Bible really says. Like, what's the way around this? And I'll be honest, you know, there might be some fine print thing here that's around what I'm saying, but the principle is there. What I'm saying here is you know, God is saying, if you get married, you should remain married, and if you do separate from the person, you should do everything you can to bring that person back. So there's more. You know, there's a pretty long chapter, and I won't touch all of it, but I will say this, that he talks a lot in this chapter about singleness, and how you know, I feel like in many cultures, especially Christians in America, we have a way of kind of saying that everybody should be married. Maybe not with our words, but with our actions. You know, we try to get everyone married. And Paul says, it's my wish that everybody should be as me, and that is to say, unmarried, because you can devote more time to your relationship with God and serving God when you're unmarried. Now, this is different from many worldviews, many religions, and yeah, I think it's something that we glaze over as a culture when we see single people. We should have a lot of compassion for them too. You know, I went on a mission trip to Bosnia one time, and we played 20 questions. We were teaching English as a second language there, and we played 20 questions probably like 40 times, and every time we would get to a girl that would be like, let's just say it was like Gwen Stefani, you know, they would say, okay, is it a man or a woman? And we would say, it's a woman. The second question was always, is she married? I just thought it was so weird. Like, out of all those times, let's say it was 20 different times that it was a woman instead of a man, the second question is she married? Because in Muslim cultures, you're not really like a real woman unless you're married. And you know, if you are, you know, a Mormon or something like that, you know, a lot of times they'll say you can't even get to heaven except for through your husband. But Christianity is not like that. We have respect and dignity and, you know, equality for people who decide to stay celibate, to stay single. You know, there's a lot that God can do with someone who chooses to just, you know, stay celibate. So, you know, a lot of what he's saying in this chapter about staying single is just basically wrapped up in this idea that it's good to be single, it's good to be married, and it's good to be single. And there's nothing wrong with being married. That is a blessing, and that is a great ministry. And there's nothing wrong with being single. That's good also. So I think I'll leave it at that. There's a lot in this chapter. I hope you enjoy reading it. I hope you dig into it and really understand what it's trying to say. And yeah, if you have any comments, just go ahead and leave it in the comment section. All right, have a great day. Bye.